Okay, we're here at the San Francisco International Book Fair. It's February 16th, 2013. And our next interview is with James Dourgarian. And Jim, I'm going to ask you the same question I ask most people. Give us a biopic. Tell us from the time you were young until you became a bookseller, your education, your siblings, and anything you can think of that would be interesting to bring us up to the point where you first began interested in books.
I'm the second of 6 children. My father was a sailor in World War II. He was a CB, construction battalion. My mother, poor Irish family. My father was born in this country, but only by about an inch. His mother was born in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. His father was born in a town called Sivas in Turkey. Armenian heritage, in a province called Sepastia, so I'm a Sepastatsi, as they say. My parents were married right at the end of World War II. Irish Catholic and a sailor, you do the math. In 5 years, they had 5 children.
Yeah, sounds right.
Including a set of boy-girl twins, and there was a miscarriage in there as well. Grew up in a family. My parents read newspapers, but there were no books in my house at all when I was a young person. When I got to be maybe a teenager, we got one by one at the grocery store, Funk and Wagnall's encyclopedias. And I remember going through them, and I was thrilled to see the illustrations in the books and read about things I hadn't read before. I was a person who read newspapers, but books are really not part of my thing, except that I was always interested in writing, whether I was doing it as a reader or if I was the one doing the writings. It always was important to me. I majored in journalism at San Jose State. My parents lived in LA. We were till about 1956 when my dad's company moved to Stockton, California. We moved north. And I eventually went to San Jose State for 2 reasons. They had a great journalism school, and I was a journalism major. And it was close enough to come home on the weekends so my mother could do my laundry.
Yeah,
they were equally weighted.
Yeah, good thinking.
And I became a journalist. I was a newspaper reporter for about 5 years. My last job was a state capitol bureau chief for a chain of 5 California daily newspapers. This would have been about the late 70s. There was a change in the economy. It was our first energy crisis when there were still gas lines around gas stations.
Yeah, I remember that well.
The economy was really quite bad, as it sort of is now, although we're coming out of it. So I had a sort of a change in my employment. And eventually I had an opportunity to try to achieve my goal as a creative writer. And I left the newspaper business and I wrote a couple of books, never got published. I wrote a couple of screenplays, some of them based on the material that I wrote, not very good. Wrote a lot of short stories. I was proud of them, but I wasn't getting published. And around 1980, as I was becoming clear that my career as a writer really wasn't going to take off, that I had an in-law relationship with a woman who had passed away, who had been the book buyer for a local department store. In the old days, there weren't a lot of standalone bookstores.
Right.
You bought books in a department store.
Sure, right.
Well, she was the book buyer, and as such, she got a lot of promotional copies, proof copies, advanced copies, inscribed trade editions that went to her home. And when she passed away, her heirs knew nothing about books.
Most people.
Somebody in the family knew that I was a book collector, and so I was brought in to help them. And so I took a few of duplicates that I had in my collection and some of their good books, and I put a little list together. I sent it to my San Francisco Bay Area dealers, and lo and behold, I was selling some books, and it was kind of successful. I said, well, the writing career not going so good, maybe I could do this book thing, and that seemed like something to pursue. And of course, I needed a paying job to finance that.
Yeah, of course.
That occupation, and that's what I did for a number of years. And thankfully, 3 years ago, I was able to retire from that paying job and become much more of a full-time bookseller. Although I really was a full-time bookseller. I really worked from maybe 9 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night every day.
Well, that's
7
what it's
days a
like.
week.
That's what it's like if you want to do this thing right.
Absolutely.
It's very labor intensive,
It really is.
but hey, it's something you
enjoy it.
love. You do it.
We don't do this to make a lot of money. We do it because we like it, and we like to be our own boss.
I think that's
Many of
very
us are not employable in any other fashion.
With square pegs,
We certainly are.
trying to get into that round hole.
Absolutely.
We're not very successful. What percentage of your activity is based around the internet?
Well, today, practically all of it.
Oh,
I used to issue a catalog or two a year. I can't remember the last time I did a catalog, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So right now, everything, well, I can't say everything. I do a lot of quoting to customers I've had over a number of years. I'll say maybe 20% of my business that way, and I would say 80% on the internet.
do you buy much on the internet?
Not as much as I used to. Nowadays, places like ABAA, where you develop want lists, so they'll send you a notification, we found the book for you.
Right.
Well, ABAA does it in the most bizarre way.
Unbelievable.
They send you the high and the low, nothing in between. And it says if you want to see all the others, well, click on this list. So I look for Steinbeck. So I click on the list to see what's new on Steinbeck. 25,000 listings, 22,000 listings. They don't show you the new listings, they show you every listing.
Yeah.
They're cutting their own subscribers' throats.
Every edition, too.
The way they used to do it was I would get an email from Abe. There'd be 35 listings. I bought a lot of books that way. Now I don't buy, I rarely buy anything that way because of the way they do it. So my internet buying is more when I'm going out specifically looking for a particular book. And that's how it works for me now.
Okay. Are there any booksellers who were influential or mentored you, or people whose opinion you valued?
I can think of 3 off the top of my head. Early on, and this would have been in the early 70s, I thought of myself as a book collector. This before I went into business. But I really wasn't. I was more of a pretender wannabe as a book collector. I was living in Southern California, and I just got the phone book out one day and looked under book dealers, used and rare. And B&L Rutenberg, Barbara Rutenberg, called her up. Do you have any Steinbeck? Because I was a Steinbeck collector. She says, well, I've got some inscribed books. Would you be interested in those? Does that mean the author wrote something in the book?
That's how novice you were.
Oh, I knew nothing. I learned a tremendous amount of things from Barbara. She was a tremendous bookseller. I bought several books from her, despite the fact that I had no money. And she would say in January, for example, Jim, I found this book. Well, Barbara, geez, I really can't afford it. It's yours. You pay me when you've got the money. Might have been 9 months later, might have been 12 months later. That book was worth a lot more a year later when I actually purchased it.
Yeah.
But I paid the price that she first quoted me.
Right.
That stayed with me my entire career.
It's a good point.
Her ability to work with me was enlightening, and she broadened my horizons. She really opened up the world of books to me more than anybody else do at that point. And I really owe her a debt of gratitude. She taught me a great deal. Eventually, when I moved back to Northern California, I was working in Sacramento. I learned a lot from Barry Cassidy, who was just starting out at that point. I also learned a lot from a guy named Herb Kaplan.
Sure.
Argus Books. And he was a guy who was willing to share information. And I was fascinated by people who, you could go into his store and he knew so much. He knew details, he knew this, he knew the value of stuff. He could tell you things off the top of his head. And I'm thinking, well, don't these people need to look it up in a book or find a reference? No, it's all up here. It's all up here.
Old-time bookseller.
And I just learned so much, and it was like, these are the kind of people that if I went into business, I want to be like them.
Right.
And that's really helped me. More than anything else, those 3 probably. And then when I went into business, as I was sort of a ghost in the Bay Area, because I was a full-time employee with another job, even though I was working the books, I was doing the books during the day, working at night. I really never got around to the bookstores in my area.
Right.
I called them. They knew my name. They had no idea what I looked like. I never came into their shops. But you found a lot of things that way.
No, Bay Area has always been a great place to find stuff.
Berkeley's, I was just telling somebody earlier, Berkeley, one of the best book cities in the world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bookstores, there's a lot of competition, but the good news is there's a lot of people who are interested in books. And in fact, the entire Bay Area is really a good book area.
It's a great book area, and there's been some of the best booksellers ever have come out of this book area.
In fact, I wish that I had had the experience of people who work for John Howell Books, Warren Howell, or some other bookseller, where you could apprentice. If I was to do it over again, that's probably the way I would do it. You can't really do that today because those sort of stores don't exist anymore.
There were a lot of important booksellers apprenticed at Warren Howell.
And they learned not only about their specific area, they learned about a lot of areas. So your book knowledge was much
increased.
better. It's like going to school for free.
Yeah. It was a wonderful experience. What do you think are some of the great challenges we face as antiquarian booksellers moving forward?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is what I refer to as middle-class books. Cheap books will always sell because people need a reading copy of this or that or the other thing. Expensive books take care of themselves because people who have money still spend a lot of money on themselves. But when we had our blip in the economy, people were refinancing their homes, having a lot of money that they probably shouldn't have had. They were spending a lot of that money. That's why when the housing industry went kaput, people suddenly no longer had any money, and that's why a lot of us started to suffer because we weren't getting those middle-class sales. And in fact, over the past 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, the buying power of the middle class has been diminished so dramatically that they no longer buy the $50, $100, $200, $300 books. It's really hard to sell those books even now. I think we're coming out of that bad economy. I think we're poised to become better, maybe not fantastic, but better, although we're not quite there yet. But it really needs to have a middle class, as Obama might say, to be stronger.
Yeah.
My son-in-law is 34 years old. He makes $63,000 a year. That used to be really good money.
Yeah.
In a situation like that, as my father was the stay-at-home, was the guy who brought home the bacon. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She raised all the children. They made enough money to pay all their bills despite having 6 children to feed and clothe and educate. And my father was able to, save a little dough every year. Then his salary grew. He was able to save a little bit more, despite some of the expenses going up, like college.
That's a huge expense.
And then eventually you get to an age where, okay, now you're considered comfortable. Nowadays, my son-in-law works. They spend every dollar they have. They can't get ahead. They're not going to be able to buy a house. I worry about my grandchildren. It may be me who pays for their education rather than their parents.
That's where I'm looking. That's the same fate that I'm looking at, because it's just a different world.
It's a completely different world, and it was the world that I expected to have, like my father and my mother. I expected that experience. Now, as I'm 65, going into my golden years, whoa, these are not as golden as I thought. That's not even silver. It might be tin or bronze or something. And it's just...
dirt.
Dirt. Not quite what I expected. And I think that that's one of the challenges that we have as booksellers. How are we going to find the buying public that doesn't have the money to buy books? I don't mean invest in books, because people who have a lot of money will still buy books.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have if you have only high-end stuff, you're probably doing okay.
Yeah.
But if you like me and you try to have a broad range, a price range, I may die with a lot of these books, and I was hoping not to do that.
It's nice company.
Yes, there's a lot of people who are like me.
So a lot of people who have reference books who thought they were going to retire and sell their reference library, and that's turned out to be a pipe dream.
Well, one of the things I've done recently was I looked at my reference books and I said, you know what? I don't need these books anymore. I'm going to start selling them. and I've started taking them to book fairs, and believe it or not, I actually have sold them to other book dealers, and I kind of wonder, in one sense, I'm happy for the sale, but I kind of wanted to ask them, are you sure you want to buy these books?
Lots of dealers want to have reference books in hard copy. I'm one of them. And I have been buying things that I think are interesting to have, and I don't really think in terms of what the final solution is going to be. It's just, while I'm doing it, I'm glad that they're there.
Actually, for the past several years, I've worked on what I refer to as exit strategy. What's going to happen? I don't want to saddle my daughter with trying to figure out what to do with Dad's books. As we all have had the experience of running into an estate sale.
Right.
The book collector dies. The wife, well, that was his crazy aspect of him. I don't know anything about those books. The children couldn't care less about those books. What are they going to do with them? Well, you're probably throwing away a lot of money.
Well, that's the way it is, and there's nothing we can do to change it.
So I'm trying to alleviate the problem for my daughter. I don't have all the solutions, but I'm working on trying to reduce the amount of stock I have. And I'm working at it, and I'm being sort of successful. At the same time, I don't want to come up with no books.
Right. No,
I don't want to put myself out of a job.
No.
But the idea, the path is to die penniless, because I will have given all of my wealth to my daughter, my grandchildren, and to die bookless. Hopefully that's not going to happen real soon, and I'll do it in a way that the transition is smooth and easy. And I don't know that it's actually going to work that way, but I am working in that direction. I've turned down 3 collections in this past year.
Really?
Because one, they were Steinbeck collections. I've got all those books. I don't need a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th.
You're not going to live that long.
Right. If they had been a Hemingway or a Faulkner, maybe I might have pursued it differently. But I just didn't go there because I don't need them, and I don't want more books that are extras. I'm approaching my book business now at 65 a lot differently than I did when I was 45. When it would be, okay, the more the merrier. Sure,
right.
Let's be 4 or 5 books deep. Let's have a lot of different authors. Let's be really Catholic, really broad about what kind of books we want. Now I want to be a little bit more specific. I want to buy material that I feel confident that within a reasonable amount of time I'll be able to sell it. Not as I'll buy it now and at some point in the future I'll sell it.
Who knows what the future is?
Who knows how much longer the future is? I'm working on it. Trying to be healthier. It's one of the reasons why I retired at 62 from my paying job, was to work on my health. Not that I was in bad health, but I realized I'm getting a little bit older. I wasn't exercising. I was gaining weight.
It's not good.
I was taking more medications. Now I've reversed a lot of that. And I'm in fact healthier at 65 than I was at 55.
I'm a lot healthier myself than I used to be too.
And I'm paying attention. You know, I tell people this all the time. When you're young, you know, your mom takes care of you. She worries about all that. When you get a little bit older, you have to be your own mommy.
Yeah. Or marry somebody who becomes your mommy.
Exactly.
I'm going to ask you just one more question and I'll let you go. If a young bookseller, a young individual came up to you and said, Mr. Dourgarian, I'm thinking about going into the book business. What's the most important thing I need?
Knowledge. And that's, you can't just find it in a book. You can't find it in one place. You have to find it from picking people's brains. You have to find it from experience. I'm actually having sort of this experience now. I got a phone call a couple months ago, gentleman. My girlfriend wants to open a bookstore in Walnut Creek, where I live. She's been interested in books for a long time, but not really a book seller, a reader. But she wants to go into the book business. She likes the idea of it. First thing I said, you know how to make $1 million in the book business? You start with $2 million.
That's a famous Maury Neville quote.
And I've been working on them. I have really trying to help them in every way I can, and advising them as to what not to do, what to do, how to get information, how to approach people. I'm sure you've had the experience that somebody calls, hey, I got this book, what's it worth? What, I don't even know you and suddenly you're browbeating me to tell you, give you a free appraisal? Now, somebody calls you up, Jim, I didn't mean to bother you, but I've got this book. Would you mind taking a, if your approach is the right approach, you get a lot further. And their approach with me has been good. And so I'm trying to advise them without having any financial interest in what they're doing as to how to do it so that they have the best chance at success. And have advised them that your expectations cannot be high. They have to be very moderate. She is going to go from a six-figure sales rep's income to a five-figure, and I don't mean high five, probably middle to low five. But I've told her, if you can live on what you're going to make at that point and be happier, well,
why not?
The goal in life, I always thought, was to be happy, and however it is that you achieve your happiness. So if you can be happy with it, great. If you're doing it because you want to make a lot of money, you might want to become an electrical engineer. Yeah. But don't go in the book business.
Which is good advice for those people.
And, as I said before, my daughter's an actor. She married an actor. Right. She couldn't have married an electrical engineer from the Silicon Valley. Their future would have been financially secure. Now I have to worry about her, I have to worry about my grandchildren, worry about their education. Are they going to have enough money? Who knows?
Hang in there. Thanks for the interview, Jim. Enjoyed it.
My pleasure, really. Enjoyed it very much.